from So Jewish, and I'm going to show you how to make a challah cover that you're going to love using. It's a really simple project. Essentially, all we're going to do is sew 2 pieces of fabric back to back and add a trim. And the fun part of this project, I think, is actually choosing the fabrics. Now you can go with something really traditional, like this burgundy and a neutral lining and adding some gold trim. That's very sort of traditional Eastern European Jewish tradition. Or you could do something more fun with color. Here's a medium blue, and you could line it with this kiwi green. And actually, these fabrics are from another project that we're working on at So Jewish, a talit bag for a tallis. You can watch for that project in the future. But for this project, I'm using some really fun and colorful graphic prints. Something with a bit of a punch to it, kind of a fruit punch. This is a raspberry color on this graphic print, and on the overscale flower fabric for the lining we've got raspberry and some lime, and we're going to trim it with maroon. So this raspberry print is our top, and the flower fabric is the lining, and the trim will go on the top. Now for the thread in the machine, I've put in the top is a thread that matches the trim. And in the bottom, I have a lighter color that coordinates with the lining, because you're going to see the thread on the lining. Alright, easy to start. So we're going to keep the top fabric on top because of the orientation of the threads. And first I'm going to sew all the way around the edge, 1/4 inch from the edge. Now you can find written instructions with photographs on the So Jewish website, sojewish.com. So you can go there if you want to look at the pictures in more detail. Alright, so first a few stitches backwards. Alright, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch around the entire perimeter. Okay, now I'm coming to the end. Back to the beginning where I started. Pivot at the corner. Few back stitches to anchor it, and I'm going to trim the threads close to the fabric. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to finish the raw edges of the fabric, and I'm going to use a zigzag stitch, a medium width and a medium length zigzag stitch. Now here's a tip when you're doing a zigzag stitch. When you take your first anchoring stitches, take them as straight stitches and then switch to the zigzag. It keeps it a bit neater and the stitching area is less bulky. Okay, so it's a couple straight stitches back. Now I'm going to switch to a bit of a shorter length. I want a medium width on the zigzag. I'm going to go medium long. And now I'm just going to go again around the entire perimeter of the challah cover. Now we're going to apply the trim. I have already applied some fray stop liquid to the edge here and let it dry. Not every kind of trim and braid you'll use will need to have the fray stop, but this one will. I'm going to place that cut and finished edge right on the edge of, right against the side. And for the long edge of the trim, I'm going to have it overhanging the edge of the fabric by just a little bit, 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, something like that. You want to cover the raw edge of the fabric. Okay, and then I'm going to sew the trim all the way around. Now I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew down the middle of the trim, and I'm going to use a fairly long stitch length. That will help the threads and the presser foot go over the trim. And you don't really need the stitch length to be particularly short. The long stitches, as long as the thread you're using is the same color as the trim, the thread is going to meld right into the braid, so you won't even really see it very much. Okay, now we're close to the corner. Let me show you the technique for applying the trim to the corner. We're going to sew right up close to this next edge of the cover. Now, with the needle still in the fabric and the trim, we're going to lift the presser foot, pivot the cover and the trim. Again, lay the trim down so that it just overhangs the raw edge of the cover, and then tuck the extra trim under here so that it sort of folds under at a diagonal. Put the presser foot back down, and you're going to want to walk your machine through the next few steps just to make sure it can get easily across the bulk of all the trim. Okay, we've done that, and now just continue on with the sides and the corners in the same way. Now we're close to the end. When you're about 1.5 inches or 2 inches away from where you started, stop and trim and cut the edge of the trim. This is where the fray check comes in very handy, because you'll notice that that edge is pretty frayed. Not a problem. We're going to take our fray stop liquid. I'm going to apply it to the end. Okay. Give that a couple of minutes to dry. With this edge now essentially dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck under the edge of the trim on a diagonal and lay it down in place. Just check my trim, that's still in a nice place. And I finish sewing. Again, when you get to the area where there are a few layers of trim, you may want to walk your machine through the last bits. And now I'm going to take a few stitches backwards. And trim. Now this edge is still a bit messier, this corner is still a bit messier than I'd like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little more fray check and go a little bit further into the trim to make sure it's nice and secure. And then when I'm sure it's totally dry, I'm just going to trim those extra bits off. I'm going to finish up by trimming some stray threads that are along the edge here. Nice. And there you have it. Nice work, everybody. A challah cover that you're going to love using. If you'd like to find out when we post other projects like the Tallit bag I mentioned earlier or some other fun things we have coming up, you may want to subscribe and we'll let you know when they're up. Enjoy!